Hi, welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Lily, and I'm here today with Charlie for our intro. Today, we're doing episode 160, where Charlie interviews John S. So that is our interview for today. And Charlie, how are you doing?
Good. And we're finally meeting
Yeah,
all these episodes. Thank you.
it's so exciting. I get to meet the face behind the voice.
And now there's a reason why we don't do videos. I'm way more handsome by. Okay, so today's subject, I thought we'd talk about this concept that I've been thinking about for maybe 50 episodes, is that the last substance that we quit is often the hardest. And then the corollary to that would be that kratom and maybe even something like Suboxone often ends up being the most difficult withdrawals and maybe the most difficult pause, the extended kind of symptoms post quitting for people. And personally, kratom was the worst. And that was the very last thing that quit out of everything. I observed, just talking to many people after all these episodes and watching forums, there's something psychological. And as Libby would often say, when you're raw dog life, that last substance, clean off of everything, if you're hitting reality, there's just something about it, I think, that makes it hard.
It's funny that raw dogging life, it's definitely a crass way to describe it, but it is a trending way to describe the fully sober experience. When I stopped drinking, I said I was sober, and I thought that I was, and I thought that was a term you could say if you're just not drinking alcohol, but I was still using weed recreationally, and I still thought that I was sober. I felt that I was at the time. And then came Kratom, and I thought that I was sober when I was on Kratom. And it wasn't until I'm a year off of cannabis now. And so I really am completely sober, like super sober. For the first time, I can actually say I'm really sober, and I really mean it. And I thought I was the whole time. So you can say you're sober, and it can mean different things for different people. It's the person who's doing it that gets to decide what they call themselves. But I think that, yes, the raw dogging of life is definitely happening over here.
Actually, I had to do a little Google there. I did not realize that maybe a better, less crass would be unmedicated or substance free.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, it does mean other things in the love life domain.
Living life's on life's terms without a crutch. That's when I turned to kratom because I was having bad days. And when I went to the vape shop, they said it was a supplement and there wasn't any warnings. So it got to the reasons why I was using kratom to try to make my day softer.
Enhance.
Yeah, take the edge off of it. Last, I think there's a compounding effect with all the quits. So for me, it was quit the drugs, and then quit the booze, and then quit the kratom. And there were saved up withdrawals on each step down of those. And my point is that the last thing you quit can sometimes be hardest. And it's not just psychological. I think there might be some kind of compounding effect over all those withdrawals.
Yeah. Something that I found out when I finally started working with an addiction specialist therapist, she told me about PAWS, which stands for post-acute withdrawal symptoms, I believe. And she told me that basically every time you quit a substance, within 6 months or so, if you go to another substance, it basically keeps the neural pathways open of that craving. And so you end up latching on to the next thing that you find. So for me, I quit alcohol. Within 6 months, I found kratom. I didn't know it was an addictive substance when I started, but my brain did. And it's, I can get what I want now through this thing that you're doing. Great. And it keeps that feedback loop of, I have a craving for relief. I find the thing, I have relief, and then repeat to infinity until you have the problem. And then I ended up quitting that. It was horrible to come off of kratom. It was a terrible experience. And I did it without assistance or knowledge of really anything except the subreddit for the Kratom drink that I was drinking. And so it wasn't until I was trying to stop smoking weed that I was informed of what pause was. And looking at that, I started to understand what I have been going through already and had to go through again with the cannabis. And I think knowing that, it felt almost worse. It wasn't worse than Kratom in terms of the physical experience. The mental experience was difficult. I still think Kratom was the worst because that substance is just crazy. It's just wild. Yeah.
That's an insightful. There might be multiple things going on.
Yeah.
Not only you're quitting, it's also something you quit within the last 6 months of something else too.
Yeah.
That addictive neural pathways are being reinforced.
Yeah.
Stepping down from those other drugs. But I do have to agree with you that there's some unique things about Kratom. It hits on the dopamine, serotonin, and opiate. It can be stimulating. It can be sedative. So I think all those multiple brain functions, it makes it harder to quit, and the withdrawal is more complex and the pause more extended.
Yeah, your brain knows what's going on even before you may realize it's an addiction. Your brain is well aware of what's happening and it's, oh, yay, this is great. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yep. But it's not great.
So, and yeah, in conclusion, I think that leads to some of the frequent relapse. I think there's a high relapse rate in a lot of addictions, but because it's the last thing you're quitting, because you're mildly quitting some other things, and because it's working on all those brain functions, that it is very enticing to relapse.
Yeah.
Get relief.
And it's almost, if you are someone that has struggled with multiple substances, it's almost like the addiction is like all these jackets that you're wearing. And it's okay, you take off the jacket of alcohol and then you have one less layer on. And then you take off the jacket of weed and then you take off the jacket of Kratom. And you're like, oh my God, I only have one shirt on. I feel really exposed. Like, this is harder than I thought. I'm getting cold. Can I put my jacket on again? And you feel like you don't have as much defense against the natural world. Like, you have to use those self defense mechanisms. You have to use your breathing tools and play the mind games with yourself and positive thinking and get help. You have to move beyond your yourself.
I love that analogy. On that note, let's get to the interview this week. The Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Charlie, and this week we're with John S. How are you doing?
Hey, Charlie. Doing well. How about yourself?
Good. Thanks for joining us. And just before we get into the interview, I have a quick announcement. I just want to let folks know there has been some changes to the Kratom meetings in terms of scheduling and some of the links. So the kratommeetings.com website is being updated as we speak. Why don't you introduce yourself, John, and tell the audience some information about your background?
Yeah, I'm 39. I currently live in Colorado. Grew up in Montana. I really like the outdoors. I like to travel. I'm an engineer. I really like science. I like space. But yeah, just like to do a lot of the outdoor things. I have a dog that I adore and I like playing with and training, and that's what keeps me going these days.
And you do have a poster behind you with some plants on it. So
Yeah, I'm a big space nerd. Yeah, that's I work in that industry really ever since I was a kid. Always was fascinated by like the Apollo missions and just really designing things that go out into unknown places.
do you know where you were when one of the space shuttles crashed?
It's funny, I do during I think it was like 2003, and the funny thing about it was I was actually at a science bowl competition. I was in
Oh,
high
wow.
school, and we had a little moment of silence. It's a Jeopardy style quiz show competition where you answer science questions, and they announced that. And yeah, and the first one, I think I was just a little baby.
Okay. I was in high school, so it happened during school.
Wow.
When you're not engineering, what do you do for fun or to relax?
I like to do a lot of DIY stuff. I have a homemade camper that I'm always tinkering with. I put in, it's got a wood stove and I like to take it to the mountains. It's a good winter camper, but I recently installed a water line from the sink and I drilled it into the wood stove so I can have wood fired hot water, which is fun. It was a lot of work for something that you don't really need, but it was more of the creation of it that was the fun part. It took me a lot of iterations and it ended up costing me more money than I paid for the used camper but I just like to build stuff. I have a dog that I got last year. I like to hunt and I'm training her to be a bird dog, and that's just been a real fun experience. And then I also like to travel. I haven't done a lot of that lately, but I've done some long travels in like New Zealand and Spain and used to work in the Bahamas and just really like to see different cultures and places.
All right. And when is your Kratom quit date?
My creative quit date most recently is April 29th, that'd be just over 3 months.
Great job. And
Thanks.
why don't you tell us about when you first started Kratom? How did you encounter it?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. It's my creative story kind of has its highs and lows, but I said I like to travel out of college. I went to New Zealand for a year traveling. And when I came back to work, I just hit a wall. I had some back pain. I've injured my back in high school and had a four-wheeler wreck. And I was having a lot of back pain, also feeling depressed. And from previous injuries, I knew that, pain pills made me feel better and they also made the pain go away. So I was going to urgent cares. And the thing is, I would have these scripts and I became addicted to that. And eventually, but couldn't always have a steady supply of them. I eventually had a back surgery and that let them last for longer. But eventually I started just searching online for, what are alternatives to pain pills? Like, didn't think I would find anything. And that was before the big forums. I don't even know if Reddit was there then, but I stumbled on a site that said there's this natural product called Kratom. It actually helps you get off of pain pills. And I didn't want to be addicted to anything. That was never my goal. And I was like, well, this sounds great. Like the magic cure. So I ordered some online. You couldn't really find it at shops back then. And I just ordered this powder. It came in this mysterious package and I tried it and it did the trick. It wasn't like that oh overly blissful feeling you get from pain pills, but it made you not withdrawal and it kept you feeling good. I use it a lot. Like I said, I'm an engineer. I do a lot of mental work. I get that. It gives me that mental rush. It makes me want to sit and crunch numbers for hours and it would help me get through those days. And yeah, I used, that was 2012 was the first time I started it. And it was a journey that led by 2014. I knew I needed to get off of it because I was like, I can't, I'm just stuck to this stuff. And I had a dream of traveling the world. So I left my job I said, I'm going to go travel around the world for 3 years. I'm going to go around the world 3 times in 3 years. And I was like, but I got to get off of Kratom to do it because I can't be addicted. And I started going to Canada. I had some friends up there and went to a little ski town there. And I was like, all right, this is how I'm going to quit. I'll just go up there and I'll be having so much fun skiing. I won't care. And after 2 days, I was just in misery and I would end up driving 2 hours down across the border to the US to buy Kratom at a shop. And then I would always go back and I'd go back up. And I did this multiple times. And I remember just sweating at the border crossing. They always would see it. I would just be honest. I would say it's an herbal tea.
Yeah.
And they would take it and test it to make sure it wasn't anything else. And they always let me go through. But that lasted for 2 months. And eventually I ran out of all the money I had used saved up to try to travel. I just didn't know what I was doing. And I went back to Montana, worked odd jobs, and just kept having these periods where I'd try to quit. And I would quit for a week, sometimes 4 weeks. But I never really took it seriously. I didn't know anything about recovery, didn't know anything about NA or AA or any of that. I usually would try to quit and just start drinking way too much. And that never worked. And eventually I'd start again. And then I keep trying to find these like ways like, oh, this will help me quit. I found a job I wound up in a job that took me down to the Bahamas, and I worked as an engineer on a little private island there. Beautiful place, doing power and wind. Like I was doing renewable energy. I could maintain that equipment, and I would go down there and I'd say, okay, I'll just be stuck down there. And once I run out, there's no way of getting any more. And I would do that and run out, be miserable. And I would just be like fighting off all the acute withdrawals. And every time at the end of my shifts, they were usually about 4 weeks, I get back to Florida and I immediately go find Kratom. Even though I was out of the acute withdrawal stage, I think, Charlie, like the thing that always hurt me the most was the pause, like the post acute, that I would just get mentally drained. And I did that for 2 or 3 years. And finally I was like, I'm not going to quit. So I'm just going to keep bringing enough Kratom with me to last for 4 weeks. And every time I was like, all right, I'll bring 400 grams. And then I would run out. I'm like, all right, I'll bring 600 grams. I would run out. And I was like, how much of this am I taking? And finally I started tracking it on my phone. And I was like surprised because I thought I was taking maybe 50 grams a day, but I was taking between 110 and 125 grams a day. And it just hit me that this is too much plant material, especially when I started, I was taking 20. And so that led me to go finally, eventually in 2019, I went to treatment for it for the first time. And I did a month-long treatment and I was off of Kratom and life was great. But then I relapsed a few years after that.
All right. Did you ever travel around the world?
I never did get to do that. And that's one of the things when I look back at my life, I think of so many areas where Kratom is the root cause of why I didn't do something. I've gotten myself in and out of a lot of debt multiple times, and it's all Kratom related. During that whole period from 2012 to 2019, I always never let myself get in a relationship because I didn't want to get in a relationship while I was in the middle of an addiction. It was just always something that was weighing on me. And the funny thing is, back then I waited so long because I was like, I guess I got to go to rehab, but I didn't have enough money because I was in that credit card debt from when I tried to travel the world, but only made it to Canada. And so I said, all right, I did something that the people at rehab were like, we've never heard of that. 2 years in advance, I planned out my rehab. I said, I'm going to go to rehab in 2 years, but I'm going to save money to do it.
Yeah.
And so eventually, once I finally figured out how much I was taking, I would go to the Bahamas, taking a couple kilos at a time. I was always scared going through customs, but they actually never checked. And then I said, I'm going to go to rehab. And in mid 2019, I left that job. I said, I'm going to go to rehab and then I'm going to go to grad school in Colorado and get into the space industry. At the time, I was in the power industry. And like I said, I'm a big space guy and I always wanted to do space stuff. So it was like my year of turning my life around. And I did that. And also after going to treatment, I did a little traveling and went to Spain and I hiked the Camino de Santiago. It's a 550-mile kind of trek across the entire country. And I think that was the most perfect thing to do during the pause stage, because that is the stage that I would always relapse in because I would be mentally drained. And when all you have to do is wake up, put a backpack on and walk, it just is perfect. And it gave me a lot of time to reflect and go over my life and think things over. It was great. And the one thing though that probably was the precursor to my relapse was during that Camino, I started drinking a little bit. In Spain, there's always wine at the end of the nights. And prior to rehab, I didn't drink for 2 years. For some reason, Kratom made me not want alcohol. And so I thought I could have a few drink glasses here and there because it wasn't a problem. But that became a little bit habitual, and it turned, even when I got into Colorado and got into grad school, I started drinking, and I had a relationship at the time, and that was definitely a point of contention. I would stop drinking for like little sober challenges with my friends, and I would go for a month or two. And in fact, I actually always felt great during those times, but I would always fall back into drinking, kind of just socially, but also even alone. I would drink a couple beers at night at the end of a long day. And so I kept, was doing that. But other than that, like everything was great. I was in the career I wanted. I had a great relationship. It was just a great time of life. And then how about 2 years after, yeah, a little over 2 years after I quit, I don't know what happened. When I started Kratom, it was just at online. And when I moved to Colorado, I just come out of rehab, and here it is at every gas station. These little bottles, they look like 5-hour energy drinks. And I was like, that wasn't around back in my Kratom days. I wonder what those are like. But I was always very, no way, we're not even going to consider it. And a couple of years later, I don't even really specifically remember the circumstances, but I just was like, let's just see. Let's just try one. This is way less. I was taking 120 grams. This is tiny compared to that.
Yeah.
I could take one of these. It's nothing like what I used to take, like the classic kind of addict story. And I took one and it made me feel good. And I was like, well, okay, we won't do that again. And then maybe 2 weeks later, I did it again. I was like, all right, that's it. And then it was like once a week, and then twice a week, 3 times. And before you know it, I was taking these little bottles. And it wasn't like the typical bottle that everybody talks about. Like the blue bottle is like a different one, but it was these little 5-hour energy drink Kratom bottles. And that lasted for just 3 months. And that was like the start of my relapse. And I say that this recent relapse was an off and on relapse that took 2 years to really take hold, because I did that for 3 months, and then I confessed to my girlfriend, and it was an issue, but she was supportive. She was really supportive for me. Like would go, she went to Nar-Anon meetings, and I think she was disappointed that I wouldn't go to NA meetings. But I stopped taking them, and I was like, I'm sorry, that was just a little slip. I'm done. About 6 months after that, our relationship hit some rocky areas, and I started using that as an excuse to be able to relapse some more. And then the relapse escalated the rockiness of the relationship. And it was like these two things happening at once that eventually led to the relationship ending. And that was just pretty crushing for me. We had plans I had purchased a ring for her, and everything went away. And I just hit this real dark depression, and I started really leaning hard into Kratom again. And by then, it wasn't like buy it online. It was like every store at every corner, I could just go find Kratom. And there's all these different exciting different brands. And it was just like, I just was like overloaded with it. And it's funny though, like after 2 weeks, I was like, I got to stop this. And I was just stuck. And that lasted for a year and a half. And then I went to a little 1 week detox center. This is still 2 years ago. And at that time, that relationship that ended, we tried it again, but it ended just as quickly. Like we tried it again. She saw I was still on Kratom. It wasn't great. And then we broke up. So by the time I went to that detox center, my heart or my mind wasn't in it. I was just thinking about her. I wasn't thinking about sobriety. I left that detox center, and 2 months later, I was back into it again. And that was the start of my most recent Kratom binge. And that lasted about a year and a half. And that coincided with when 7-OH came out. And before that, I was just taking extract shots. I used to take these $5 ones, then it was $20 ones. And then 7-OH came out, and that just was like game over. It became I maxed out every credit card I have on 7-OH. I'm currently filing for bankruptcy. Actually, I'm like on my desk, there's a pile of paperwork that I'm filling out. And it just took me, I thought in 2019, I was at bottom when I went to rehab. But at that time I had no debt. I was in good shape. I was starting a new career. Like this most recent binge took me to bottom, and I was taking like that 7-OH, spending probably like a $100 to $200 a day on it for a long time. And that, you add that up, that equals maxing out all of your credit cards. So I finally just search in December. I searched my podcast for Kratom addiction, and that's where I stumbled on this podcast. And I started listening to it and just listened to it. It was the first thing because I've always go to NA, and I've always struggled with. It's just a different. I felt like I didn't identify. I always felt like everybody has their own problems, but I would go and I would always be embarrassed to say what my addiction was because these
Yeah.
guys were doing stuff and they were talking about real like problems where their kids get taken away for protective services, just like these issues. And I'm like, I have a good job, but I'm taking this thing that's destroying my life. And they would always I always felt judged if I said it was Kratom. And when I found this podcast, I could just relate to everybody so much. And I knew I needed to quit. I was just trying to figure out how I knew I needed to take a bunch of time off of work, and I was trying to figure out how that could work. And I listened to that episode with the Dr. Casey Grover, and he talked about Sublocade. I've never heard of that before. And I always had been leery with Suboxone just because I was afraid it would last forever. But I knew I needed something with just the amount of 7-OH I was taking. It got so bad where I was waking up 2 to 3 times a night every 3 hours, just in sweats, shaking, just miserable, terrible feelings in my brain and my body. And I was just fearing the withdrawals. Like I didn't know how this was going to work. And so that episode with Dr. Casey, he talked about Sublocade, and I started researching it. I found a clinic here in Denver. And initially it was tricky. I have insurance through my job, but my insurance denied it. And they said I needed to try to take 2 oral forms first and show that they had negative side effects. And then maybe they'd consider approving Sublocade. And the doctors at this clinic, they were great. They helped play the insurance game, and they prescribed just like an oral form and then another one. And eventually I was able to get it. But by the time I quit, I didn't have the Sublocade yet. I just had the oral form, and I was nervous. I read a lot online that Suboxone Sublocade doesn't fully cover the 7-OH withdrawal symptoms. And I was like, I'm going to try this. And I finally got time off of work, took 2 weeks off. I went up to Montana to be with my family and made a whole routine of like, this is how I'm going to get off. And I waited 12 hours until my last dose of 7-OH. And I did go through terrible withdrawals. When I went through withdrawals in rehab in 2019, it was pretty bad. I remember waking up on the floor underneath my mattress somehow, just tearing at sheets. And then this one was that times like 10. It got so bad where I got delirious. I was at my mom's house and she kept waking up, and she said I was like just walking into walls. I guess I was deliriously sleepwalking, and I was just all over the place. And finally, after 12 hours, she gave me my first Suboxone, and I just went to sleep. And I woke up that afternoon and I felt remarkably okay. I was surprised. I was expecting I was going to still feel terrible, but I was like, I feel okay. I think I can do this. And I took Suboxone for about 3 weeks, and that's how long it took to get the insurance to turn around on Sublocade. And then I took my first injection, and then I stopped the Suboxone, and it was fine. And just last Wednesday, 4 days ago, I got my third and hopefully final Sublocade injection. I did 2 300 milligram shots and then a 100 milligram shot, and I feel really pretty good. The thing I love the most about it is not only did it help the withdrawals, but relapse prevention. I never thought I'd say this, but like I haven't even considered Kratom or 7-OH since then. And it also has helped alcohol. Like I haven't drank since then either. And I've heard that it can make you very sick if you drink. And I guess I should say I haven't drank. I tried one time to drink, and I drank about a half of a beer, and it was terrible. Like it made me feel bad, and it tasted funny, and I dumped it out, and I'm like, okay, we're not drinking. We're not. And I know that I don't know why I tried to drink. I think it was just a foolish moment, because what I learned is that in order to quit, I need to quit all of it. And
Yeah.
be serious about the recovery thing.
You're a long-term user. You were an early adopter. 120 grams a day of a powder habit is pretty serious. And then the physical symptoms you experienced, then you had an important relationship blow up, personal bankruptcy. Those are pretty serious things. And you went from the whole gamut in terms of the spectrum of all the products out there too. So we do have a standard question we ask everybody. You talked a little bit about alcohol, but problems with other addictions before, during your Kratom addiction?
I guess I would just say, like, immediately before Kratom, it was the pain pills
Yeah.
that kind of led to it. Other than that, like nicotine, I still chew like nicotine pouches. I used to chew tobacco, but not real serious long-term addictions. The pain pills were for like that year and a half, kind of coinciding with the start of Kratom, but nothing other than that. I probably have always drank too much. I went to college, had the binge drinking experience, but it never was like this. I need a drink. I'm not going to get through the day if I don't have a drink. This was definitely the main addiction in my life, where it was just like this took over everything. It ruled and controlled every decision I made.
So what happened this last April that everything lined up where you finally, after this last relapse, decided this is it, I'm going to do it?
Yeah, I think I hit the right kind of bottom. And it got to the point where after I maxed out my credit cards, I couldn't like the last credit card got maxed out like a week before I quit. And after that, I was like, I have no money. I started going to pawn shops, and I would have to, and luckily I was able to buy the stuff back. I did the pawn loan, but I just felt terror. I was just so disappointed and disgusted with myself. You're 39, you have a good career, and you're going to pawn shops because you don't have enough money to pay for gas. And it's funny, I'll, like when I started the Kratom, it was like 2 weeks later, it's like, okay, I got to quit. But then it took a year to line it up. And I think I'm always afraid of like the impacts of like once I quit, I'll have the acute withdrawals, but then I'm afraid of, yeah, but I'm going to have to go back to work and do a lot of mental energy. And that's my trigger. And so I'm always like, how am I going to make this the most successful? And it was really learning about the Sublocade and being like, okay, this actually seems like a good way to go. And then work was really busy earlier this year, but we had a nice lull period right at the end of April, early May. And about a month in advance, I was like, all right, that's when it's going to happen. I timed it up with my family's plans. They made some commitments to stay home, like to be in Montana to help me. And yeah, it just kind of lined up. It took a while to get the Suboxone sorted out, and it just needed to happen. And I guess every time I've quit, I've never felt like this about it this long after, to where I'm like, it's an inexplainable feeling of doneness. Like there is no avenue in my life to where I could go back to it. And there's just nothing that could happen that would make me do that. I look back on my life, it stole my relationship, it stole all my money, my happiness. I haven't been doing a lot of that anhedonia feeling where I had no fun anymore. Even doing the things that were supposed to make me have fun, I wasn't having fun. It's just, yeah, I'm so tired of it. It's been
Yeah. And
too
it's
long.
literally doing the math at age 39 and starting off, it's like a third of your life.
Exactly.
And you have quit many times. Outside of Suboxone, did you have anything that helped with the withdrawals from all your experiences other than medicated assisted treatment?
Yeah, I did a lot of this most recent one, I was doing cold plunges every morning. There's a river in this town. It was early spring. That really helped. Working out is a big one. Working out, meditating, and journaling are the three that are very important. When I'm doing those, I'm feeling the best. And then I also have been through this podcast and through the Reddit forum, I discovered that there's this whole community of Kratom recovery. And I've gone to the online meetings in and out. I was doing those initially. And then I also discovered here in Denver, there's a community called Free. It's like a coffee shop, but it's like a recovery community. I've gone to that. a couple times. And then also I'm calling myself like spiritually searching. I connected the dots, and I grew up with a strong kind of religious spiritual foundation. And when I stopped having that is right around the time I started taking Kratom. And I've discovered that having just some kind of spiritual foundation, whether it's tied to a religion or not, is important. So I've been right now I'm church shopping, I say. I'm I'm checking out different churches every Sunday and just going, trying to find that community. But really, I think it's just those things that develop a community that are the most important.
I want to check out that documentary I think Martin Sheen did about the El Camino.
Yes.
Or get the El Camino. That's a car, right?
Yeah, but people call it the El Camino.
Okay.
Yeah.
But since you did get off of Kratom for 2 years, and with the benefit of hindsight, do you have any advice for somebody that to prevent a relapse?
Relapse. Yeah. Stay serious about it. As soon as you think you're doing really good, that's when it can get you. Yeah, for the first like year and a half of those 2 years, I thought I was never going to do it again. And I quit thinking about myself as a recovered Kratom addict. This is like, I don't know. I just try to disassociate from that part of myself. And so as soon as some real hard life things started happening, I let it back in. Another thing that happened around that time, and I'm sure it plays a part, but it's something that I'm going to take into account, is I had a nose surgery. And I had pain pills from that nose surgery, but I had my girlfriend keep them and administer them to me at a real controlled rate. I never felt the high off of them, but I sometimes wonder if that triggered something deep inside of me. And so, yeah, I think I have since, when I'm looking into getting like a different surgery, and I told the doctor that I would like to do it without narcotics. I just don't want to take that chance. So that, I don't know if that's an avenue for everyone, but I think that for me, I'm sure there's some types of surgeries where you just can't go without. But I think for me, that awakened something inside of me, on top of the fact that, on that plus the fact that I was drinking off and on. So I think I wanted to be like the outlier. I wanted to be like, I'm going to go to rehab and just quit this substance, but it's okay if I still casually, socially drink. And I thought I could be that outlier, but I think I've learned just enough about myself that I can.
Yeah, your story has a couple things that ring true with a lot of people that have been on our podcast. One is that transfer addiction to alcohol or to other things that can happen when you quit kratom. And then the other thing I heard you talk about is the post-acute withdrawal symptoms can be obstacle too. And we're talking maybe a year or two after or more sometimes with kratom. But yeah, I think I had in my addiction, I didn't drink for over a decade. But during that time, especially at the end, I had a couple surgeries where I had Vicodin and Tylenol 3, and I used them, broke all the prescription rules, and I didn't count it as a relapse because I didn't drink. And then I went through a year where I was prescribed a stimulant for attention deficit disorder, and I totally abused the heck out of that. And I believe those two experiences was the setting that got to me to the place where I ended up drinking again. Oh, you do have to be careful of all that stuff.
You really do. That's funny you say, because that was another thing I did. I also was taking an ADD stimulant, and that started about a year before I relapsed the second time. And I also questioned that, because that kind of opened up that dopamine flood in my brain, and I was not taking it as prescribed.
Yeah.
And once you're like, ooh, that dopamine feels good, what else can I do to find some of that? Yeah, I'm not taking that anymore either. And I think I've just learned I need to, I can't be an outlier. I'm just a normal person like everybody else. And it's gonna affect me the same way. I can't overcome one thing and try to trick the system.
Yeah. Yeah. I get in trouble when I think of I'm a special case. Is there anything else that you're doing lifestyle wise to remain kratom free?
One thing I'm just doing is I'm being extremely honest with everybody. I'm really fortunate to have a good support network, my family, and I guess I just tell them everything. If I'm feeling like, if I ever am feeling one way, when I said I had that half a beer, I told them. I'm keeping myself in check. And because as soon as I start keeping secrets, that's when that can escalate. And then, yeah, just the searching for listening to this podcast is like one of my biggest forms of recovery, even though that's not community, but it plugs me into like stories that I'm so familiar with. And then I'm searching for the right kind of recovery community. I've gone to NA meetings. I struggle there's some disconnect, and I don't know if I just need to push through it and keep going to them, and maybe because everybody says they hate it for the first year and then they love it. It's sometimes the thing is, like, at those meetings, I get the talk can get so depressing, and I almost get partly triggered, and I'm like, gosh, is this? I come away from them feeling worse than I went into them. I'm like, that didn't seem like it did anything. But I really like the idea of having a sponsor. So I'm still trying to navigate that because I just know I need to do something. I need to do something. Like my recovery has to be more than just taking Sublocade. So I've just been trying different things and trying to find the ones that stick.
Okay. Towards the end of the interview, we like to change gears and have a little bit of fun. So just a couple of personal questions. Do you have any pets?
Yes, I have one little Springer Spaniel dog. Her name is Astra. I named her off of Astra is the Latin word for star. So I had to go space themed. She's at my feet right now, but she's awesome. I got her a year ago and she's been keeping me sane. She also doesn't let me sleep. So there's that. But I don't think I think my sleep has gone down since I got her, but my happiness has gone up.
She's doing a good job. She hasn't made any noise during the
She
whole
is,
interview.
yeah. Yeah, we were playing in the park earlier today, so I try to tire her out. She's extremely high energy. She's a field bred. She's bred. I want to take her bird hunting this fall.
Oh,
and
yes.
she has this extremely high drive and she needs mental stimulation and physical stimulation. So if I don't do something like that every day with her, she's just is pacing and she won't let me sit. So
I already forgot from the beginning of the interview, you're training her to be a bird dog.
yeah, it's a fun goal. How often we're actually going to go? Because bird season's coming up and I haven't figured a lot of that out as far as where to go in Colorado, but just the action of training her is just a fun thing to do. And she's really smart. It's fun to watch her pick things up and learn new commands. And it's been really enjoyable.
What kind of music are you into?
I like a lot of older stuff. I like classic rock. 20 years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said country, but country has left me, I would say. I like old country. I like a lot of the old Waylon, Willie, Merle. And then I do the new kind of, I don't know even what you call it, Americana bluegrass, Tyler Childress. I call it underground country, if that's even a thing. I just always say I like music that tells a story. I'm more of a lyrics guy. So if it tells a good story, I like it.
Would Sturgill Simpson be in there?
Yeah, exactly. He's one of the main, underground country guys. I don't know what that genre is. Country that's not on the radio.
I just heard him a couple of weeks ago for the first time, and I liked what I heard.
I really like him.
Other than having a bankruptcy paperwork on your desk, what is your life like today, Kratom free?
It's just great. It feels good to not be constantly sweating about if I'm going to make it to the next paycheck. I'm starting to now, there's still pause even with Sublocade, but I'm starting to now get this motivation back. I have a lot of just mental energy again. And I love that because that's always the thing I'm the most afraid of is, will I ever be able to do this high mental stuff without Kratom? And I love this feeling of, yes, I can do this with my own brain. I don't need Kratom. So that's great. I do a lot of hikes. In a couple of weeks, I'm going up to Montana to do a big river float trip with some old friends. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then, I'm still tinkering, working on the camper here and there, making little things. I'm trying to get into like homemade robotics. I have an Arduino and I'm trying to learn how to code and make little toys that really do nothing, but just teach me things along the way.
Cool. Is there anything you want to say about 70H and that experience?
Yeah, I guess I'll say I'm really happy to see it. It's starting to get the attention it deserves. I think a law in Colorado was just passed to limit it to like I think 2 or 3. If it's more than 2 or 3% 7OH, it's banned. And then I know the DEA has just started talking about it. I think it. Yeah, I just don't think it should have been. I think it was just like came out of nowhere, and I imagine we're going to start hearing a lot about just a lot of people who got addicted to it. The forms they sold it into was just interesting. Just drink mixes, like hydration drink pouches, kind of candy tablets. It really was a different experience. It was like the feeling of a full on opiate, and it was touted as being, oh, it's more bang for your buck, but you end up spending way more on it anyway. It's a really interesting. It's strange and bizarre how it was there, to be honest.
And is it true that the withdrawals come quicker?
Yeah, yeah. And because when I was actively using it, it was every 3 hours I needed to dose. And I would just be sitting at my desk and all of a sudden just pouring with sweat and like feeling this feeling. And I eventually got to where like I always had it in my pocket or I was keeping it right on my bedstand because I would wake up in the middle of the night just feeling miserable. And I don't know, I'm going to been getting like some labs done at the doctor I'm curious like if there were what kind of health effects. I'm curious with my whole kratom addiction. That's the thing that scares me is having done this for this long, like what is this going to lead to in 10 years? I'm trying to get ahead of some of that stuff. One thing I do know, and I don't know if it's from the 7OH, from the kratom, getting off the kratom or just getting older, but I do, I am like, I have really bad joint pain. Like every morning I wake up, it takes about 2 hours to feel normal just walking. It's my back, neck, knees, elbows, like every joint just really throbs. And I don't know, that started even before quitting. So I don't know if it's like some rebound effects or just if it's something else that coincided with that. But I don't know. It was worrisome. And it's with all of that stuff, you don't know what you're buying. It's not regulated. You don't know who's making it, what the factory is.
Yeah, there's
Mhm.
risks of toxic metals, fertilizers, all sorts of environmental hazards. Starting in 2012 until today, has the marketplace and the kratom world just changed a lot over those many years?
Yeah, definitely. When I started, I don't think, I couldn't find, I don't think there's any stores. There's by 2013, 2014, there was a couple stores like that you could find it at, but it was mostly just online. But you would go to doctors or addiction counselors and they knew nothing about it and you had to educate them. I will say by the time I went in 2019, they had a pretty good grasp of what it was at the treatment I went to. They had heard about it. They were aware of what the withdrawal was like, and they treated it just kind of like a normal opiate. They offered me Suboxone back then, and I turned it down. Just I didn't think I wanted it, and I had a whole month of rehab to help me. But yeah, I think it's definitely changed. It's definitely now. It used to be such a small thing, but now like you can drive down the street, there's those banners like Kratom or like the LED flashing signs, like big billboards like Kratom, CBD. They sell all this stuff and it's a weird world. Like those, not only Kratom, there's all these other weird things they're selling, like weird smelling salts and I don't even know, weird legal forms of THC, and it's just a weird world. This kind of obscure, off semi-legal drug world. And
Yeah.
it's the thing with all those though is I don't think any of them are like have the addictive potential that Kratom has, and that's just the thing. It yeah, it can really take over your life pretty fast.
Yeah, I think people are blindsided by that, especially because it's promoted as not, and so people,
Yeah,
not everybody has the same reaction to it, but so
yeah. I guess the one thing about the culture that's changed is I never thought I would walk into a place that's called like a kava cafe and see people sitting at a bar just drinking Kratom drinks out of these big metal mugs. That is just a bizarre thing. I actually went there once. I was actually looking for kava, and I went there for kava, and I saw they sold kratom too. And it was when I had quit, and I was like, well, I'm getting out of here. It's just, but it's a weird culture because those places are touted as this alcohol or alternative health spa, and they'll do yoga and meditation sessions, and I'll drink kratom together. And it's just a weird kind of oxymoron to me.
Yeah, my understanding is most of those, it's 80% or more. It's the kratom that is being sold at those.
I'm sure to keep the doors open. Yeah.
Yeah. Kava does seem to have a way less addictive profile. It might be, and I think that's why kratom hitches its wagon on the Kava
Yeah.
branding, but in history. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention to our audience that I didn't bring up?
No, I just want to, say again, I really appreciate what you're doing here. I really appreciate this podcast. I've been addicted to kratom for so long that I've always felt like a loner. None of my friends do it at all or know anything about. Nobody in my community knows anything about kratom, and I've always just felt really alone. So it's just been really. And then I'll go to treatment and I find people who know nothing about kratom. So finding a group of people who really understand this and have been there, I'm just real grateful that it exists and that these kratom meetings exist. And
It is really an isolating thing. And that was why the podcast was born, was just to try to link some people, because it can be very lonely. So it's nice to not to have to do it as a lone wolf. We appreciate you telling your story, and good luck, and stay in touch and let us know how you're doing.
absolutely, will do. Thanks a lot, Charlie.
Thank you.